Hey guys, welcome back. So today's video is going to be targeted towards the new handgun buyer, the novice handgun owner, somebody that possibly just picked up their first handgun because of the pandemic that's sweeping the world right now. There's a lot of gun buyers out there that have never owned a gun before who have gone out and purchased a handgun to defend themselves, their family, and loved ones, and they have no idea how that gun operates. Now, this video is not a substitute for reading your owner's manual from front to back. I would normally tell you to go out and seek out instruction on how to use this firearm by a competent instructor. But I also understand, because of the lockdown orders that have been given in all 50 states at this point, at the federal level, and then even at the state level, they've expanded those lockdowns even more, even right here in Indiana. It's not really practical to go out and get training. So this video is meant for you guys. We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of like how to field strip different types of handguns. That's not important in my mind right now. This video is for those of you who have purchased a new revolver, striker-fired handgun, double-action, single-action type handgun, things like that, how you can safely handle that firearm, safely load it and unload it, and then after this crisis passes, I hope you choose to keep your firearm and remain part of our Second Amendment community, and then you seek out proper instruction. This video is just a stopgap to help some of you new shooters, new gun owners out there to better understand the firearm you may have just purchased. So let's get started. One of the most popular types of handguns currently being sold in the United States is a striker-fired handgun. Here I have a SIG P320. It's a very popular handgun in the United States right now. It's really climbed in popularity over the last few years, so much so that the United States government has adopted it as its new service handgun, replacing the M9. So that's why I've chosen this particular handgun to showcase in this video. This handgun represents a striker-fired pistol that does not have a manual safety. So let's take a closer look at the P320. This will be very similar to other striker-fired pistols on the market, like the Glock 19, Glock 17, Glock 20, 21, all the variations of the Glock pistols, the other striker-fired handguns from Walther and from CZ and Smith & Wesson. They're all going to have basically the same operation. Some striker-fired pistols will have a manual safety, others will not. Glocks, for example, do not have even the option of owning one with a manual safety. Other striker-fired pistols, like those offered from Smith & Wesson, you will find a manual safety being optional. So, with that being said, let's take a closer look at how a striker-fired pistol without a manual safety works. Most handguns are going to have the magazine release located on the left-hand side of the gun near what we call the trigger guard. You push this button, and it drops the magazine out of the handgun. Some European designs like HK and Walther will have a tab on either side of the trigger guard that you will push down, accomplishing the same thing, dropping the magazine out of the firearm. This handgun, in my opinion right now, is not in a safe state. This handgun has a magazine in it, the slide is closed, and I cannot see if there's a round in the chamber. So let's go over how to safely load this handgun and then safely unload it so you guys can better understand how a striker-fired pistol of this type is used. All right, guys, so semi-automatic handguns feed from a magazine. And there are different types of magazines, but most modern firearms load the magazine the same way. And that's what I want to show you guys how to do first before we load the actual handgun. Here you have a standard P320 magazine and a 9mm round that goes with it. This is the bullet, this is the brass case, and then on the very end you're going to see a little primer right in the center. You're going to want to make sure that the bullet sets in that fashion in the magazine. To load a cartridge into the magazine, I like to kind of start the round that's already in there with a thumb or an index finger, take the rim of the next cartridge, push it down behind what we call the feed lips, down and then back until it's seated. I'll show you again. I push the round down just a little bit, roll that next round across, push it down and back underneath the feed lips. The feed lips are right here. And you'll continue to do that until you have the magazine fully loaded. All right, so what you don't want to do is leave a magazine with the bullet slightly forward of the front of the magazine like that. Make sure that they're seated all the way to the rear. And you definitely don't want, whoops, I can't even do it incorrectly when I want to. You definitely don't want to see it sitting in the magazine like that, okay? That round is sitting backwards in the magazine. Make sure that round is facing that way. Okay, let's load up the P320 and show you how to safely load and unload the pistol. Two things really quickly. First of all, I'm wearing eye protection and hearing protection. Let's talk about the hearing protection. You can pick up hearing protection that is as cheap as foam earplugs that you insert into your ear. I caution new shooters from using those because many times people won't seat them properly in their ear and it won't offer them the hearing protection that they need. Even beyond that, I still prefer over-the-ear hearing protection. It stabilizes the jawbone, and in my opinion, non-scientific, I believe that this offers better hearing protection. You can get over-the-ear hearing protection like I'm wearing now that's non-electronic for right around 20 bucks from a gun store, from Walmart, Cabela's, any number of places. Because a lot of people will wear hearing protection when mowing the lawn and things like that, and you can use that hearing protection while firing your handgun as well. The second thing I'm wearing is eye protection. The eye protection, you can spend a lot of money on ballistic lenses, or you can just use eyewear that's commonly available, again, at most hardware stores, Walmart, things like that. If you wear eyewear when you mow the lawn, when you trim hedges, run the weed eater, that same eyewear can be used to protect your eyes when firing your handgun. With that being said, let's go ahead and load up the striker-fired pistol without a safety. So what is a striker-fired pistol? What that means is, on the back of the handgun, you're missing what's called a hammer. And I will shortly show you what a hammer looks like on semi-automatic handgun like this. So it does not have an external hammer. It has a firing pin inside of here that is either fully cocked or partially cocked, and when you pull the trigger, it lets it go. It strikes the primer, starts the chain reaction, gunpowder goes off, and bullet goes down the barrel. So to load this handgun, here's how I prefer to do it. Typically, you're going to find what's called a slide stop slide release right here. In the P320's case, and in modern Glocks, things like that, you're going to find it on the other side for left-handed shooters. I push up on that with my thumb and draw the slide to the rear. One thing that's absolutely critical when handling a handgun is that you do not get your hand or any other body part in front of the muzzle. Also, always be careful where that muzzle is pointing, because the gun, you have to treat it as if it's loaded. Never assume a handgun is unloaded. So always make sure that wherever this gun is pointing, to the best of your ability, it's not pointing at something that you don't want to destroy or something you don't want to kill unintentionally. Okay, that's very, very critical. That's one critical element. We'll talk about another one here momentarily. So I've locked the slide to the rear. I've taken the magazine out, and I can see inside the gun and visibly check that it does not have a cartridge in the chamber. So now I'm ready to load the handgun. I'm going to point it in a safe direction. I'm going to take my magazine that I've loaded. The bullets face forward. See how the bullets are sitting in relationship to the handgun? Insert the magazine into the grip of the pistol until it locks firmly into place. At that point, you will now see a cartridge sitting there ready to be loaded into the handgun. I simply use the slide stop slide release. I push it down. It chambered around. Now, all that's required at this point to fire the striker-fired pistol with no safety is to pull the trigger. That's why finger discipline is absolutely critical when handling any type of handgun. Keep your finger off that trigger until you're ready to shoot. This is one of the hardest concepts for new shooters to understand, because you naturally want to put your finger on the trigger. You've got to go against that natural instinct to want to put your finger on the trigger and keep it off until you're ready to fire the handgun. Now I can fire this handgun, and when it's empty, in this particular case, it will lock open. And I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to fire the handguns here on this video. But now we have a loaded handgun that is ready to be used. It can be stored safely in a bedside safe. It can be stored safely into a holster that covers the trigger, and it's ready for use again. To unload this handgun, this is absolutely critical. The first step in unloading a semi-automatic pistol that's magazine fed is to remove the magazine. Many novices make the mistake of pulling the slide to the rear, kicking the round out in the chamber, then they drop the magazine out. The only problem is that they're still around in the chamber. If I pull this to the rear, I still have a cartridge in the chamber. So how do we avoid that? Very simple. Let me load it back up here for you guys. Weapons loaded. Drop the magazine first. It has to come out first. If you don't do this, your gun is still going to be loaded and extremely dangerous. Drop the magazine out first, set it aside, and then simply keeping your finger off the trigger, pull the slide to the rear, and kick that round right out onto your nose. I like to actually cup it and drop the round into my hand, but be very careful when doing that because you can get a body part in front of the muzzle. But you want to make sure that that weapon is clear. To make sure that it's clear, once again, push up on the slide, stop, slide release, lock it to the rear, and visually inspect the firearm. Put the slide home, and now it's considered unloaded. However, always treat it as if it is loaded. Let's move on to the next handgun. On the P320, I showed you that the magazine release is right here on the left-hand side of the pistol. On this handgun, it can be reversed, but what's noteworthy is the location of the magazine release. Most modern US sold handguns are going to have a magazine release here. A few will have a heel release, and others have that European style release. So the next handgun I'm going to show you is an HKP30. This represents a double action, single action handgun that has a hammer. This is the mechanical component that's missing from the P320. This is not a striker fired handgun. It has a firing pin like a striker fired handgun, but it includes one extra component, which is this hammer. With the hammer back, this is considered single action. With the hammer forward, I just used a decocker. I'll explain that momentarily. The hammer is forward and it's in double action mode. So let's explain the two different types of modes that a double action, single action handgun like this HKP30 has. All right, so right now we have it in double action mode. First, I want to make sure that the weapon's empty. Magazine is removed. I've checked to make sure that that chamber is clear, but I'm still going to treat it as if it's loaded. I'm going to point it in a safe direction. Now this handgun, once I pull the slide to the rear and load a round into it, that hammer is going to stay back. Some don't. They're called double action only pistols. In this case, the hammer will stay back because we have two different firing modes. So right now it's in single action mode. That means hammer back. All I have to do is pull the trigger and the hammer fires the cartridge. It'll fall, fire, gun will cycle, the hammer will stay rearward, okay? I do not recommend carrying a handgun such as this with a round in the chamber and the hammer back. Again, this handgun has no manual safety. Some double action, single action pistols like this one will have a slide mounted safety or a frame mounted safety that would allow the safe carry of the hammer being held to the rear like this. But any double action, single action handgun like this, I highly recommend you carry it with the hammer down on a live round in double action mode. So what is double action mode? The hammer's down and you'll notice the trigger's further forward. In single action mode, that trigger's held to the rear. Single action mode has a much lighter trigger pull. Part of the safety mechanism of a double action handgun like this, or double action, single action handgun, I should say, is that it has an option for a very heavy trigger pull that slowly draws that hammer to the rear before releasing it and firing it. However, once it fires that first round, it automatically goes to single action mode, unless you're talking about a double action only handgun like this, in which case it'll go right back to double action mode, requiring that long trigger pull as a safety. As I mentioned, handguns like this typically have a hammer drop safety. And what that allows you to do is load the pistol and then safely put that hammer forward without having to pull the trigger and thumb that hammer down. When you do that, if your thumb slips off the hammer while you're easing that hammer forward while you still have the trigger pulled, bang, gun goes off. Use the hammer drop safety. On the H&K P30, it's right here behind the slide and it's a push button. Other handguns will have a hammer drop safety that's on the slide that you can rotate down, rotate up in some European models, or they'll have a hammer drop safety incorporated somewhere on the pistol grip itself that you can depress that will drop that hammer down. Some European models will also have a hammer drop safety integrated to the top of the slide, like the Janik pistols or the older Walther P99s. The point is, read your owner's manual, find out if you have a decocker. If you do, please use it when loading the pistol and making it ready for carry. So let's go ahead and load this up. It has a magazine much like the previous handgun I just showed you, the SIG P320. And once again, you have the option of pulling the slide to the rear and locking it open. The P30 has ambi control, so I have a slide, stop, slide, release on both sides. I can push up on that, lock the slide to the rear, insert the magazine, push the lever, drop the handgun, and decock it. Or I'm gonna show you a different method, which is applicable to a striker-fired handgun like the P320. The slide is home. I'm gonna take the magazine, insert it into the pistol, make sure it's firmly seated, finger off the trigger, grab the slide by the serrations. You can grab it like this, or you can grab it like this by pinching it, and pull that slide to the rear firmly and let it go. It just chambered around, but now that hammer is back. I'm gonna use the decocker to put the hammer safely forward on a live round. Now this handgun is ready for carry. Simply pulling the trigger will make it go bang. There is no manual safety. If it has a manual safety, you will have to put it on fire mode before the gun will fire. To unload this handgun, it's exactly the same thing, or same method that you would use for the striker-fired pistol that I showed you. First, drop the magazine out. This one has one of those European-style releases, which is present on both sides of the trigger guard. You push down on that lever that's right behind the trigger, and that takes the magazine out. Critical, take the magazine out first. Now I'm going to pull the slide to the rear and drop that live round out. Now, what I just did, again, it's something that I do. I've been around handguns a long time, and I figured out a way to safely do that. The best way may be just to simply pull that slide to the rear, kick that live round out, then lock that slide open and make sure that it does not have a magazine in it and it does not have a round in the chamber. Now you can put the slide home, drop that hammer, and put it away in a safe or something like that. The handgun's unloaded, even though you should still treat it as if it were loaded. Let's move on to the next handgun type. This is a revolver. It's a double action, single action revolver, which means its trigger mechanism operates much in the same way as the HKP-30 that I previously have shown you. So the trigger mechanism is very much the same. As a matter of fact, the P-30 gets its operating mechanism from earlier revolvers. So they carry that over because that double action is considered a safety. This handgun has the option of being fired by cocking the hammer, pull the trigger, super light trigger pull. Definitely don't carry a double action revolver in this mode. Again, there's no manual safety. And typically you only have the option of thumbing that hammer down once you do cock the handgun. So let's go ahead and talk about how we can make sure that this weapon is clear and safe. Handguns like this will typically have a cylinder release somewhere on the side of the revolver. In the case of the Ruger GP100 that I have here, it's a button that you push right here. And when you push that button, you can swing the cylinder out like that, okay? Here I can see the gun is empty. To load it, we'll show you that momentarily. You'll close the cylinder and rotate it till it locks, and now the handgun would be ready for carry. One thing you should never do with any revolver is what you'll see in Hollywood. I'm going to do it here because this is a very robust handgun. I don't think I'm going to break it doing it once, but with handguns like Smith & Wessons and stuff like that that have very delicate lock work, doing that is a good way to damage your handgun, okay? So please don't do that with a revolver. Now let's talk about loading the revolver up. I've opened the cylinder. On Smith & Wessons, you have a button you'll push forward with your thumb. On this one, again, we have that push button. I have the cylinder open, and now I can drop in cartridges into the cylinder. Let's see if I can find a good view for you guys here. So I just drop the cartridges in one at a time. Now this one is a 10mm. I'm not going to get into the disadvantages of a 10mm revolver. I'm just a 10mm fan, and I don't keep a whole lot of double action revolvers around. The weapon is now loaded. Once I close that cylinder, rotate it until it locks. Now the handgun is ready for carry. All right, you would put it into a holster, and now the gun is ready to be fired. To unload the handgun, very simple. Once again, you're going to hit that lever, open up your cylinder, and there's a thing called an ejector rod. This right here. Now it's not going to work on this handgun because it's 10mm, but what you would do is invert the handgun, hit that ejector rod, see how it pokes down, and it will kick out the live rounds in the revolver. When you do that, make sure every single chamber on that cylinder is empty, then close your cylinder, and the gun is again unloaded and ready for safe storage. but treat it like it's loaded and keep your finger off the trigger. Let's move on to the next common type of handgun that's out there on the US market. There are handguns on the US market that are called single action handguns, semi-automatics in this case. I'm carrying one now. It's something that I like to carry, and it's called a Colt 1911 in this case, but 1911s are made by a number of different companies. Some can be very affordable, and a lot of people like them. It's a very popular handgun in the United States, and I can only imagine a lot of gun stores have sold handguns much like this one. This one has a light on it right here, and that, for the most part, you can ignore for the purposes of this video. This weapon, I'm carrying it in a thigh holster. People call them leg holsters, but they're actually thigh holsters. And I'm openly carrying it because I'm just doing some work around the property today because it's nice and warm outside. But this weapon is ready to go. It's in what we call cocked and locked. The hammer is to the rear. This is the only way the gun can fire, and the manual safety is currently on. So let's talk about how to unload the handgun before I reload it and show you that process. This handgun has a release button for the magazine right here behind the trigger guard. Once again, guys, I'm driving this home by repeating it. Drop the magazine out of the handgun before you do anything else, because that is the biggest mistake a novice or new shooter will make with a self-loading pistol like this. Drop the magazine out. Just stick it in my back pocket here. Now, in this case, I'm going to take my manual safety off. This one has an ambi safety. It's present on both sides, but you can see this lever going up and down. Take that off, which will free up the ability for the slide to move to the rear. With the safety on, the slide will not move to the rear, and the trigger cannot be pulled, releasing the hammer. Take that safety off, pull the slide to the rear, and it will throw out that live round. Now, just like the other semi-automatic handguns that I've shown you here in this video, I can check to make sure that the magazine is out, and I can visually inspect the chamber and see that there's no cartridge present. It has a slide stop slide release right here, and I will hit that to let the slide go home. And with this particular handgun, again, there's no decocker. The only way to safely decock this handgun is to grab it, pull the trigger, pinch the hammer with your finger and thumb, pull the trigger and ease that hammer forward, then release the trigger, okay? I do not recommend carrying a 1911 with the hammer down on a live round in the chamber. The only way I personally carry 1911s is in this mode, which we call cocked and locked, or condition 1. It's something that you can Google. So let's go ahead and make the weapon empty and show you how this weapon would be loaded. Just like the other semi-automatic handguns, we can insert the full magazine into the grip, make sure that it's seated. Now I'm going to either grab the slide like this or pinch it, pull the slide fully to the rear and release it, and now it has a round in the chamber. However, the hammer's back, single action mode that I explained earlier. Now I must put the safety on before I carry the handgun in this condition. All right, so, and what do I do with that one extra round? I'm gonna top the handgun off here really quick. I'm gonna put it into its holster. Take the ammunition, put it, this is a single stack magazine. Take the handgun out. And what I've done is what we call topping off the pistol. Recently, my friend, Iraq veteran 8888, right here on YouTube, released a video about firearm safety. I highly recommend you swing by and watch that video as well. I'll put a link to that video in the description below. So we've covered most of the basic operating principles of handguns commonly encountered in the US market at gun stores across America. There are outliers that we didn't cover in this video. It'd be too difficult to do, but this gives you a basic understanding of the most popular types of handguns that are currently available. You have a very specific type of handgun. You have a model number. A great way to learn more about that handgun can be done right here on YouTube by searching for your handgun type. There's plenty of great videos out there that are going to give you more in-depth information about your particular firearm that you've recently purchased. So, guys, we hope that you use your new handgun safely, that after the crisis passes, that you keep your firearm, remain part of the Second Amendment community, and seek out proper training. We are funded by you, our viewers. We don't take money from the gun companies to produce content. Our viewers support our efforts here at the Military Arms Channel. There's a little join button right underneath the video player. You can click that button and learn about becoming a YouTube member and supporting the channel that way. Another way to support us is by Patreon. There's a link in the video description below. Click that link and consider becoming part of our Patreon family and supporting us in our efforts here to bring you information on YouTube about firearms. And last but not least, please swing by and check out coppercustom.com. Thanks for watching, guys. Be safe and try to learn as much as you possibly can about your new firearm. Thanks for watching.